You're about to start lesson 4 in the mini course. Again, I'm Alex Lyon, and if you haven't yet subscribed, I encourage you to do so and check the rest of the videos on the channel out. On this particular video, like the last one, some people don't like a couple of the tips because if you fall in this category, you might feel like, well, that's a lot of structure and I don't normally communicate that way. Well, that's true. Not everybody communicates in a structured, orderly way, but it is one of the best ways to sound more concise, clear, and confident. So give it a try. Check your self-talk and motivation. Why is it that you don't want to communicate this way? Because if you can get to the bottom of your inner thoughts, then you're much more likely to succeed and communicate in a clear fashion. So let's jump right in. In our last lesson, we looked at concise statements, and in lesson 4, we're going to look at organized thoughts. Concise tip number 4, organize your thoughts into clear points. This is, of course, one way to remain concise, but it also adds an incredible amount of clarity and confidence to your message. Messages without a clear structure are very hard to follow for your listeners, and long lists dilute each item's value. You've probably sat through presentations where somebody had 20 items on a list, and there's really no impact there when you have that many items. Much better to create fewer clear points. A clear organization shows clear, confident thinking. Here we have a messy desk and a joke I pulled from a comic. If you think this is bad, you should see the inside of my head. This actually looks a little bit like my desk, and I'm all for creativity. However, once we're sharing our thoughts with somebody else, once we're communicating, we really have to stay more structured so that they can follow along with what we're saying in a clear and understandable way. Richard Feynman said it like this: if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you really don't understand it. And the idea here is that if you really understand something, you can explain it in a very clear and structured way for your listeners. They talk about being able to give a freshman lecture on a concept. And if you can't give a freshman level lecture, then you don't yourself understand it. So this structure will help us clarify our own thoughts and help it land for other people. Structure provides a schema or a mental framework that helps keep thoughts clear for you, helps your listeners follow your point. It gives your message cohesion or an overarching arc, and it helps everybody remember. Strategy 1 is to break messages into 2 to 3 chunks. For example, let's say you're having a conversation about getting healthy and you want to share this information with somebody else. Instead of just rambling, you want to break it down into clear points. For example, you could talk about diet, exercise, and the importance of working out with a friend. And underneath each of those themes, or some people call them buckets, you would give your details. So if you're talking about diet, you might talk about counting calories or Weight Watchers, etc. Under exercise, the different options, and under working out with a friend, how you would hold each other a little accountable for staying on track. I was talking to a friend of mine, and this is a real life example, and I talked about his retirement plan. He's retired, and he said, 401k, I have some rental income, and a little bit of Social Security. Instead of giving a long-winded, disorganized, rambling answer, he was able to give me clear themes. And then we continued the discussion about each of these 3 items, and he provided some nice detail. I was watching a movie about a disabled man from Ghana many years ago, and he had one good leg and one disabled leg, and he finally got a meeting with a community leader, and the leader said, "What are your priorities?" And he said, "I want to help provide independence, mobility, and sports for the disabled people in Ghana." He had just a moment to break the ice with an extremely clear message, and to this day, I remember this documentary film that he communicated in that clear and confident way. And I instantly thought, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. When we do this, we want to organize our chunks, our main points, into some logical pattern. A nice logical pattern is going to help people remember, and it's going to clarify our thoughts for ourselves. Before, after, problem, solution, benefit, cause and effect, steps in a sequence, or in other words, chronological, etc. Lots of different options here. You're not limited to this list, but it's nice to have a list handy. For example, let's practice with this stream of thought example about somebody's day. I got up, got ready, ate breakfast, and worked out. I did some shopping on the way home from the gym. I bumped into Katie at the store. She wants to get together tonight. I actually got some work done during the day, shot some videos, did some editing, and organized the tools in the garage. I was hoping to get together with Katie and John tonight, but I also have some people to get back to, some calls to make, or at least a couple of texts to stay on top of some things. So this sounds a little bit like rambling, but you can basically follow it. It's much more clear, however, if we structure this into main points. For example, chronologically, morning, afternoon, and evening. And each of those items has a few details underneath it. Those themes provide a really great way to clarify your message, make it much more concise, and it'll sound very confident compared to a rambling, disorganized message. It's handy to have a list like this around when you're preparing for meetings, important conversations, and certainly presentations, because you don't have to create this from scratch. You can invent new ways, but there are lots of great schemas already available for structuring your ideas. Strategy number 2 is to then state your roadmap. So you have your structure, and now you want to forecast those points aloud with key words only. So a physician might say to you, let's talk about symptoms and then treatments. Now you have a roadmap for how that conversation is going to go. And I recommend also calling out your points along the way. So let's say you start with symptoms, you talk about that for a few minutes, and if you're the physician, then you might say, now let's turn to your treatment options. And that'll be a really clear signal that you're shifting gears, and it again reminds people of that schema, reminds them of your buckets, and it helps your message stay clear. So structure provides freedom, even though it seems like it boxes people in. We go back to mindset that we talked about in the early lesson on long-windedness. Why are we long-winded? Sometimes people resist applying structure because it feels too restrictive. It feels like it's robbing them of something. But there are a lot of benefits and there are freedoms that you can experience within a good structure. First of all, it eliminates tangents, which is good for your thinking, and it's good for listeners. They don't want to hear tangents any more than you want to get off on them. But it also provides a place for more detail. So if you have clear main points, then you can find some nice details and sort them into the relevant place, and then they'll make sense. And it gives even long stories a sense of cohesion. So let's say you tell a 5-minute story that's disorganized. It's going to feel like it lasts forever. If you tell a 5-minute story with clear beginning, middle, and end, then everybody will be able to follow it and it won't feel long at all. So structure is a tool to help you sort need-to-know information versus nice-to-know information. We talked about this in an earlier lesson. If it doesn't fit into your structure, either you have the wrong structure, the wrong main points, or it's just not need-to-know information. It might be just something that's nice to know, which is why it doesn't fit in. And that way, when you communicate with listeners, you're giving them high-value information with every sentence. So we want to organize our thoughts into clear points. Our takeaway strategies are to break ideas into 2 to 3 chunks and then state your roadmap really clearly before you share your message, and then remind people of your points as you move through them. So our task is to apply this in conversations, meetings, and presentations that you have coming up in the coming days. And I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson on effective pauses.